Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our virtual town hall today with Congressman Larson. My name is Charles Parasino, and I am the Communications Director for the Congressman. We thank you for joining us today. And if you have a question for the Congressman, you can submit it in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, along with the town you are from. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can submit a question in the chat along with your town. We may not have time for every question, but we will stay on and try to get to as many as we can. Now I will turn it over to Congressman Larson.
Well, thank you, Charles, and thank you everyone for joining us. Let me apologize profusely, but air travel today isn't what it used to be, and unfortunately, because of delays in a flight that was supposed to land before 1, didn't land until 3:30 almost. So I profusely apologize, but wanted to make sure because we've received an overwhelming amount of calls and interest from individuals just trying to make head and tails out of what's transpired since January 20th and the takeover by President Trump. And of course, the flooding almost daily of new incidents and executive orders, et cetera. I want to assure everyone that we are working tirelessly to do and take to task everything that we believe deserves challenging and do so. Our best alternative continues to be through the courts and to hold up these executive directions. But I think, as all of you are clearly aware, Mr. Trump controls both the executive branch and both legislative branches of Congress in the House and Senate. So it makes our task even harder, but no less determined to make sure that we stand up to all of his actions. Mr. Trump also, I think, as many of you are aware, is a master of distraction, and as I firmly believe, puts out a number of these things primarily to make sure that he grabs media attention for the day and make sure he takes the spotlight off of what his real goal and what his co-president Elon Musk and he are up to. Now, I say that somewhat with tongue in cheek, but as Shakespeare would say, more truth is said in jest than not. And the power and authority of Elon Musk is equally troubling and is being challenged on a daily basis. But in the meantime, I think you're well aware of what's transpired and what happened at the Treasury and the steps that Congress is taking to stop that assault, and primarily from them gaining access to people's information and data. And so we are deeply concerned about all the privacy issues that we're going to be facing, et cetera. And again, are moving in conjunction with Democrats in the Senate to, again, make sure that these matters are taken to court, that temporarily, and I want to commend both Attorney General Tong and Governor Lamont for the swift action that they have been taking and joining, rather ironically, attorney generals across the country in red states and blue states who, understand the gravity of this situation. So, but often people say, well, what do you think the end goal is here and why all of this? I think it's pretty clear. In 2017, you may recall, that's when the major tax cut of the Trump administration, and from his perspective, his legacy went into effect. As many of you know, that was a $2 trillion tax cut. over 70% of it going to the nation's wealthiest 1% of people. And it also heaped the $2 trillion in national debt because it was unpaid for. Now, it's no coincidence when he brought on Elon Musk, and again, someone who's not an elected official, someone who is neither a volunteer or a federal employee, but gave him a special volunteer status, which is being challenged as well, an enormous amount of power and a goal. As you'll recall, he said that he had given him the task of finding $2 trillion in cuts in the government. So I think you see the picture. Those tax cuts that sunset this year in 2025 that passed in 2017 amounted to $2 trillion. He's having Elon Musk come on board and telling him to make cuts of $2 trillion so that they can, again, pass on their tax cuts to the wealthiest 1% of the American people. I don't think that that's what people were bargaining for in this election, but as we all know, elections have results and consequences as well. But we're geared up and prepared to fight at every level, especially in the Ways and Means Committee, where a lot of these tax issues will come up. But it can be very annoying and aggravating, especially if you're listening in and to the daily media and to the news and saying, my God, what's going on? Why can't we stop this? Etc. And here again, I would say this, it's as without putting my history teacher on and going back and saying, well, we all know that we are a system of checks and balances and co-equal branches of government in the executive branch, the legislative branch, meaning the House and Senate, and the judiciary branch, of course, the Supreme Court and our court systems. And right now, with the Republicans controlling the House and Senate, and not a one to date being willing to stand up to Trump in this assault, it makes the task of being in the minority, we can make an awful lot of noise. We can send all the appropriate letters, but our best course of action to date is to engage with the judicial branch and take these cases to court, because that will allow us the time, and also hopefully the time for citizens. And a number of citizens throughout the hearings we've had, I conducted 5 hearings back in the district, and at every hearing, people wanted to know not only what we're doing, but what they can do. And I found that extraordinarily encouraging, that people are taking this kind of a deep interest because of the concern that they see happening here in Washington, D.C. The president is far more skillful and clever than I think a lot of people will give him credit for. I do think he's a master of misdirection because he wants to have you focusing on something else. And talking to a number of you, and whether it's, we're going to invade Greenland or take back Panama, rename, the Gulf of Mexico, annex Canada, you name it, it comes up every day. And of course, what you had to take seriously when he had Netanyahu at the White House, and to come out with his proposal for the United States to take over the Gaza Strip, well, that's you'd have to go back to an old series that was done on comedy TV where it thinks he might be linking the two, where he's going to move Palestinians to Greenland. But not to be trite about this, because these are all serious things and they have consequences. So suffice it to say that we've got our work cut out for it. Our work is to continue to inform the American people, to put Republicans' feet in the fire and ask them to join us. And the way that's going to happen is by citizens beseeching their government, not just their elected officials, but Speaker Johnson and Republicans and the president, because this is not the way I believe most Americans see their country running, and are very concerned, especially when it comes to a person who's in control of data, who's become the wealthiest man in the world because of his use of data, having access to all that information. That should give everybody pause. And certainly that's something we want to have the courts look into, and we're going to do everything within our power and have to make sure that we're able to stop that and get the kind of results that we desire. So, Charles, because we're running behind and because I want to most importantly hear from our citizens, why don't we start by taking questions from them, and that way we can proceed to give them an opportunity to get their questions in.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. And we have been getting a lot of questions. And as a reminder, please state your town and your question in the chat, when we will try to get to as many as we can. Our first question comes from James in Broadbrook, who asks, what is being done to reduce the tax burden for seniors who are on Social Security, since taxes have already been paid on this money while we were working? Trump's plan would raise the deficit by billions of dollars, so we need a better solution to the problem.
Well, James, thank you for that question. We've actually, as many of you know, have had a bill for, all the 4 years that Trump was president that actually did Social Security 2100, that actually did recognize that what amounts to double taxation, your Social Security should not be taxed. You've already paid on that. But back in 1983, they changed the law, and Social Security has been taxed. Now, President Trump, as James pointed out, does have a proposal, and he campaigned on it, that he's going to repeal the taxes on Social Security. And as I indicated, so do we. But well, here's the difference between the two plans. He does not pay for his tax cut, just like he didn't pay for the tax cuts they gave to the wealthiest 1%. And you might say, well, what does that mean? What that means is that's over a $900 billion hit to the Social Security Trust Fund. So the good news is people would get a tax break. The bad news is that it would, again, hit Social Security so hard that there would be a 36, maybe even higher, as some estimates indicate, % cut in everyone's Social Security benefits. Now, if your goal ultimately is to hurt and harm Social Security, I suppose you could see that as helpful. But we agree with the president, they should be a tax cut, but it should be paid for. And we pay for ours. And coincidentally, how do we pay for it? We pay for it by saying straightforward, simple, and direct. Everybody, including billionaires, needs to pay their fair share of Social Security. And so what we've done is, following what President Biden had indicated, We lift the cap on people making over $400,000. Now, I can't see all of you, but at most town halls I go to, I ask everyone in the room to raise their hand if they're making more than $400,000. And usually I find that to date, no hands have gone up. Well, no, I take that back. Once in East Hartford, someone, in fact, I knew raised their hand, and I looked, I said, "You're making over $400,000?" He said, "No, but it felt good to raise my hand like I did." So the point being this, because you're a billionaire doesn't entitle you not to have to pay what everybody else pays into the system. And so that's what our bill does. And that's why it's so vitally important. And not only does that not hurt the trust fund, that helps the trust fund. It extends its solvency and allows us to not only cut taxes, but provide increases for people. There hasn't been an enhancement to Social Security since 1971. Richard Nixon was the president of the United States the last time there was an enhancement to Social Security. Now, I know some of you are out there saying, no, wait a minute. Didn't just back in December, didn't we just approve, the teachers and firefighters and police officers who have long been wrongfully penalized as well? Don't they now get Social Security payments? Yes, in 2025, they'll be getting Social Security payments. That's the good news. The bad news is that bill wasn't paid for either. And so that's a $98 billion hit to the trust fund. In our proposal, and we're putting these forward with Speaker Hakeem Jeffries and Chairman of the Ranking Member of the Ways and Means Committee, Rich Neal, to have a Social Security program that pays for these and provides the extra benefits that people need. In fact, not hurting the trust fund, but making sure that the trust fund is getting the kind of money it needs to sustain itself and expand programs for all people on Social Security. Imagine there's over 70 million Social Security recipients, and 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible. So thank you for the question. We can't have a tax cut that's not paid for. It hurts and dismantles the Social Security trust fund, and therefore hurts the 70 million Americans that it's helping. So next question.
Thank you. And we are getting a lot of questions on this topic, but Donald from Wethersfield asked, are you going to file court actions against Elon Musk and Donald Trump for their violations of the law and the US Constitution?
Well, the short answer is we're going to be working with attorney generals all across the country and with our own William Tong to do just that. And I think I was talking with Senator Blumenthal, who, as I think many of you know, was also former AG. And we do think that this is the best path forward. We're also consulting with the Congressional Research Service and looking at everything that we can do to make sure as legislators that we're doing everything we can to protect Americans' Social Security and our citizens' Social Security as well, and to stop them from going down this path.
Thank you, Congress. Our next question is from Roseanne in Bristol, and her question is there an update on the windfall elimination provision, or the WEP? When can we expect to start receiving our funds, and can Trump stop this change from happening?
Number one, he can't stop it from happening. It is in the process right now, but what has happened, he has also targeted the Social Security Administration. And so currently, and I don't think many people understand this, Social Security is the nation's #1 insurance program, the #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly, the #1 anti-poverty program for children. And in doing so, people rely on these dollars. And for so long, under both WEP and GPO, teachers, firefighters, municipal employees, police officers were denied the money that they had paid into the system because they worked another job and they worked and paid into the system. They were not getting their Social Security checks, and that was wrong. Our proposal not only put in and repealed it, but paid for it. So, but what transpired in December was that it was passed unpaid for. And now the Social Security Administration is putting that together. We'll be doing another forum just on this alone because we've been working with the Social Security Administration to make sure that all this information, but by the same token, they've been hurt by the elimination of federal employees. In fact, it might astonish you to know that the administrative cost for Social Security, the largest insurance program in the federal government, is administered by federal employees for under 1%. You can't find a private sector business. When you look at insurance companies in the area, et cetera, and what their administrative costs are, 16 to 20+%. So to operate this and to do so effectively under 1%, at 2% is probably closer to what we need. And that would give us the actual human beings there to answer people's questions on a regular basis. So two things have to happen here. We anticipate initially, they're hopeful that maybe by mid to the end of March, they're going to be able to start processing and finishing the work of the legislation passed back in December. We'll be working with them to make sure that that process goes as smoothly as possible. Well, but what's going to make it smooth is the hiring of individuals to make sure that we do that. The passage of that law impacted 2.9 million Americans. And so we want to make sure that they're eligible to receive their benefits and then continue to work on making sure that they're paid for as well.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question is from Sanjay in West Hartford, and he asks, will Democrats use the debt limit and budget negotiations coming up in March to roll back this administration's harmful cuts, such as funding for biomedical research that was recently frozen?
Well, I don't know if you've had, Sanjay, if you've had an opportunity to hear our leader in the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, speak, but we are absolutely, when it's one of the few tools that we have, because it's so close between Democrats and Republicans. We have 215 Democrats. They will ultimately have 220 Republicans. And so it takes 218 votes to pass a bill. So the margins are very close. And there are a number of Republicans who are saying they're not going to vote for the bill. Well, so this is the time for Democrats, and we will use every tool at our disposal to make sure that we're leveraging this budget deal in order to make sure that Trump doesn't steamroll everybody with executive orders, while we also continue to take this process and go through the courts. And thankfully, to date, and it was heartening to hear what even Justice Scalia had to say about what Trump is doing as well. So we got our shoulder to the wheel, and yes, we'll be prepared to utilize every tool that we have.
Our next question comes from Christine, also in West Hartford, and she asks, what will you do to prevent unelected individuals who have not undergone any security clearances, specifically Elon Musk and his unelected, unqualified government acolytes, from accessing information that requires security clearances?
We have a bill just to do that, again, initiated by our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, of which I'm a co-sponsor of, that would prevent any unelected official. And remember, not only was he not unelected, he did not have to go through any Senate confirmation to take a post within the White House, that he's operating in what they call it Doge. I call it Dodge, because they dodge responsibility, and he's operating what they call a government efficiency. But again, he's not been confirmed or approved by the Senate. He's not regarded as a federal employee. He's not even regarded as a volunteer, because even those individuals have restrictions that are on him. Instead, Trump has said that he's a special volunteer, which is supposed to have a limited amount of time. Well, if he had a day, that's too long from our perspective, because you need to be accountable. You need to be responsible for the actions that you take. Because you're the wealthiest man in the world does not entitle you to run roughshod over the American people or the American Congress. We hope that our colleagues on the other side are going to join with this, but it's been very despondent, to say the least, that so far they have not, and that they would willingly give up the legislative branch of government's authority and responsibilities under the constitutions and cede them to the executive branch.
Our next question comes from Joshua in Hartford, and he shared, with the help of your office, I have been fighting for my disability benefits. I thank you and Lisa for the assistance I have received. I'm wondering what is happening at the congressional level for victims of SNAP benefit theft to have their benefits replaced.
Well, to have SNAP benefits cut, it would be just extraordinarily awful, and what it would do to children. And let me also thank Lisa Perrone, who works in our Connecticut office and just does an outstanding job. In fact, I like to brag on the fact that other offices outside of Connecticut and in Connecticut, because of her reputation and for the stellar job that she's done at that position in providing people with assistance, has been terrific. But here again, through executive order, him coming in and making a number of these changes, and particularly to the SNAP program. Again, for those of you who I think probably most people know and understand, but that is the way that we're able to get food to the underprivileged and to the kids and families and people in the wealthiest nation in the world who need them. And, you know, this to me is just insane, but it should come as no surprise, as I said earlier, when you're charged with finding $2 trillion in cuts, and the 70% of the budget of the United States is Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, and defense. it should come as no surprise that this is the area that they are going to continue to go after, and it's going to, again, we will remain vigilant. Let me also commend some of the red state governors who actually have been calling in to the president and letting them know, just how wrong-headed these ideas are. It's one thing to be a wealthy person and good with numbers, but neither Donald Trump or Elon Musk loses a moment's sleep at night over any of these decisions, while so many American families and people that are struggling to make ends meet wonder what in God's name is going on here? How could this possibly happen? And will I have food for my children tomorrow? And that's why it's so important that we fight and that we continue to make sure that we, as I think William Tong so eloquently said, we'll see you in court. If the Republicans will not stand with us legislatively, and they have the majority, then we're going to have to take them to court and fight in every way that we can. And it is our sincere hope that the American people continue to let both Republicans in the House and Senate and the president know about their concern as well.
Our next question comes from Paul in Wethersfield, who asked, does President Trump have the power to send troops to, quote unquote, take over Gaza without congressional approval? And would that require just a simple majority vote? And would you vigorously oppose this plan?
Well, we will vigorously oppose it. And yes, to the deployment of American troops comes under the jurisdiction of Congress. And again, here with Netanyahu standing next to him, President Trump announces that the United States is going to take over Gaza. I can't tell you how stunned I think most people were to hear this, because the serious nature in which he said it, and almost seemed, although the look on Netanyahu's face was that he hadn't heard that before, but nonetheless, when you think about that in general, and as disturbing for him not even to mention or talk about a two-state solution in the process. I was talking to Linda Roth over the weekend, and she reminded me of the comedy show back in the 80s, where they actually jokingly talked about relocating Palestinians to Greenland. And so you can, it's not a laughing matter when you think about the lives and about the people and the seriousness of this nature. But to your point, yes, we will be prepared to stand up and prevent this. I think the president probably, even within his own party, is starting to get pushback with respect to that. But by the same token, we've heard other Republicans stand up and fully support him in this endeavor, and are going to fully support him in anything that he chooses to do. There's a part of me that thinks that this is yet another distraction. And as I think you can probably readily see, the media loves Donald Trump, because he's bound to say anything any day, and it will lead people down another rabbit hole or someplace else. And that's where the focus is on the day, not the real goal, that I'll continue to reiterate, which is to make permanent the tax cuts for the nation's wealthiest 1% at the expense of working families here in the United States. And we're very much aware of that on the Ways and Means Committee, and that will continue to be our focus and the education process that we have to go through, not only with our own constituents, but reach out beyond as well.
Our next question comes from Jake in Manchester, who asks, has there been any discussion amongst Democrats about the proposal which was introduced by Thomas Massey in Congress to terminate the Department of Education, and how to stop that from passing?
Well, yes, there was immediate concern, obviously, by it, and speaking as a former teacher and I have quite a few family members, including my daughter and son-in-law, who are teachers as well, and just the thought of doing away with the education department. If anything, we should be underscoring the importance of education and a department that's focused on getting the brightest and best teachers within our system and producing the best education system anywhere in the world. There's no question that everybody knows that how important that is. And this is, again, another Trump pronouncement. And if you follow what he's doing here, it's flooding the field almost daily so that there's so many issues out there that people start to get overwhelmed or not focus on what's really happening. So in slowing this down and in utilizing the system of checks and balances, challenging this, taking it to court, fighting this is going to be the best way when the legislative branch won't engage. Now, I would think that there would be a number of Republicans that would be concerned about this. But again, that remains to be seen. And hopefully they are, but if not, we're going to take this to court. This cannot transpire.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Patricia in Windsor, who asks, is it safe to file taxes on the government's IRS website?
Yes, it is. It is safe to do that, and we made sure that it's not only safe, but it's free, and we passed that piece of legislation in the Ways and Means Committee, and so please feel confident that that's the case.
Our next question comes from Deborah in Hartford, and she asks, how legal is it for Elon Musk to offer buyouts for federal employees and to try to unilaterally wipe out agencies like the U.S. Agency for International Development?
Well, here again, it's another issue of flooding the field. And yeah, by what authority does Elon Musk have to do that? We believe that that's illegal. That will result in us challenging it with regard to the court systems. The court systems, as you probably are aware, have already put a pause on it. And I expect they will continue to do that. This, of course, as you know, would be disastrous to our communities. But another reason also why we have to hold Mr. Musk to task as well.
Our next question comes from Wynn in West Hartford, and he asks, what is the quote unquote wrecking crew doing or going to do to Social Security and Medicare? And what can we do about that?
Well, as I was saying before, when you're tasked with cutting $2 trillion and the 70% of the federal budget is comprised of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense, then you know that they're going to continue to go after this. We're going to resist them. And I will say this, I do think that red state governors especially know the impact and what this would mean to their citizens. And so I do think we'll be joined there. Surprisingly, to date, we haven't been joined by the Republicans in the House or Senate. But I believe that's coming as well as they hear from their citizens about this impact and what it will actually mean. But make no mistake about it, that's the charge that Donald Trump has given Elon Musk. He said, well, he's a billionaire. He's got to know what to do with this. He can look at these numbers and tell you how we can cut to achieve that $2 trillion that we'll therefore be able to hand out by way of tax cuts to the nation's wealthiest people. Now, to be fair, yeah, others will get, 30% of the American people will get some kind of tax cut as they did. But when you look at the vast majority of Americans that will be impacted by this and end up paying for it, doubly, both in terms of the people it hurts and the money that will come out of your wallet in order to pay for those billionaires to have more tax breaks. Doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense when you lay it out like that.
Our next question comes from Mark in Hartford, who is joining us on Facebook today. And he has a comment that we need you to stand up as strongly as possible in DC, in the media, and in Connecticut. We need strong leadership now.
Well, I assure you that the entire delegation is standing together, House and Senate, and doing everything that we can, and will be on any media show that we can to talk about it, that will be issuing daily press releases and updates, that will continue to hold town halls and forums so that we can continue to educate the public on where we are, what we're doing, what's happening, what's transpiring. And probably, again, the most important thing that we can do right now is through the court system as a way to stop. And I say that painfully because, as you've heard me say throughout this program, we're in the minority. And so we don't have the votes to block or stop unless we're joined by Republican colleagues. Now, we're 3 shy of having 218 votes. So we're looking for 3 good people on that side, I guess you could say, in order to be a force. And we will continue to put every kind of pressure and use every avenue available to us. But I also tell people, don't get frustrated by this. But if you're the media, are you going to cover Larson standing up to speak out technically about what's wrong with this program that's going to impact SNAP or is going to hurt this area, as opposed to invading Greenland? What do you think is probably going to get the news? This is when I say the president is clever. He's clever at distracting and clever at conducting and holding the media, and they willingly follow him because it's newsworthy. And but that doesn't stop us or prevent us from doing our daily job. Our responsibility, from my perspective, is not to be distracted and to remain focused and to remain vocal about how we see the impact of his executive orders and what kind of legislative or legal action we need to take.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Meg, who writes, can you provide a list of the bills that House Democrats have offered to stop Trump and Musk?
Well, thank you for that question, Meg. Actually, again, I preface this by saying we're in the minority, but here again, I'd like to commend Hakeem Jeffries, and you can go to our website and look at all the bills that we put up there. But let me just read through a few, and it's preventing cost-raising tariffs, because this tariff abuse, and you all saw the fiasco and witnessed what transpired between our two closest allies, Mexico and Canada. And again, I think a lot of that was distraction, but again, we're not taking anything for granted. There is occasionally, a use for tariffs that we have, but that has to be handled very strategically, because otherwise, really, that's a tax on working people. That's who ends up paying the bill. So we have the preventing cost-raising tariffs, protecting federal workers in terms of saving the Civil Service Act, restoring, again, something that President Kennedy, initiated and is near and dear to so many individuals, and is so important for us as well. So, and it would require congressional approval under our legislation to revoke or modify civil service protections for federal employees. We'll be defending the Paris Climate Agreement, and also restoring global support for reproductive health care, condemning pardons of violent rioters, protecting access on birth control, protecting the U.S. Postal Service from privatization, protecting immigrant access to schools and hospitals, protecting Americans' data privacy, especially. And there are more, but please go to our website and you can find them, and appreciate the question.
Our next question comes from Anya, who's in Windsor, and she's 7 years old. And she asked, how will you protect people who come from other countries to our state?
Well, first and foremost, Anya, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your question. And listen, no matter what your status, you are entitled to an education in the United States. ICE cannot enter a school without a warrant signed by a judge, and the Connecticut Department of Education has reminded all of our schools of this. On our website, we also have a link to where people can learn their rights and share it with everyone who may need them. And I would encourage you to call your state legislator as well, and your state senator, and involve them in this process as well. But wherever you can gain access, I have signed on and co-sponsored the American Dream and Promise Act, which would create more legal pathways for citizenship. I have also signed on to a resolution to prevent family separation in the event of immigration arrests. These are trying times and scary, I can only imagine, especially for a 7-year-old. But we're here to help and protect you, and count on our support.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Patricia, and she is joining us from Windsor today. And she's asking, how concerned should veterans be about their access to benefits, healthcare at VA hospitals, and payments?
Well, veterans should never be worried about, using their benefits or going to the VA. That said, we know Republicans are looking for benefits to slash to help pay for the tax cuts. We will be vigilant with regard to that, and we will be speaking out, and we will be making our voices heard to the VA and to as well as SNAP, student loans, Social Security, the Husky plan, and Medicaid in the state of Connecticut. But veterans should never be worried about using their benefits. And anytime you have a concern or there's a problem, please, again, contact our office, and we are happy to weigh in on your behalf.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Mark, who's joining us from Manchester on Facebook today. And he shares that he is currently a graduate student. With the Trump administration attempting to derail the Department of Education, could this affect my ability to receive financial aid?
Well, in short, number one, again, I don't believe that that's legal. And I think that it's, I would not be worried, but I'd stay vigilant. And the scary thing is here, we just don't know. It's one of those situations where every day he comes out with a menu of different things. And of course, when you have an administration that wants to end the Department of Education, it should give everybody pause. The fact that we're even asking these questions shows how, I guess, how half-baked the proposal is. We also know Republicans want to raise funds in part by cutting student aid and making student loans more expensive. And to what purpose? So they can pay for tax cuts, which is, I think most people realize their tax cut proposal of 2017 sunsets this year in 2025. And Trump wants to make them permanent. And to do that and to pay for them is about $2 trillion. So that's the concern overall.
And thank you, Mark, for that question. We've gotten a lot of questions on the issues of the Department of Education and student loans. For example, Joni in Glastonbury also asked, how will cuts to education impact students applying for student loans through FAFSA?
Well, I think the same thing applies. We don't actually know yet, but obviously if there's cuts to education and they come out of in the student loan area, it would limit the ability to get the kind of relief that students and frankly parents of students need as well. I mean, the cost of education today is no small order, and it just only adds to the frustration already of how difficult it is for people to make ends meet. Then to be further burdened by this doesn't seem to make any kind of sense practically from a policy perspective or from an education perspective as well. Again, because we want to make sure that the United States continues to be the preeminent place in the world to get an education and turn out citizens who, again, are going to continue to lead the world.
We have a question from Ruth, who is on Zoom with us at the moment, and she asks, what do your Republican colleagues in Congress have to say about why they are so willing to let President Trump act with impunity?
Well, Ruth, I think that is the question. I had some hope because back in December, 38 of them stood up and opposed the president. Well, it was actually a proposal made by Elon Musk, so I guess it's hard to differentiate who's the president sometimes. But at any rate, Trump agreed with him, but it all had to deal with the debt ceiling. And Republicans have long held, conservatives have long held a deep and abiding feeling about the debt ceiling. And they speak frequently about it. And yet Trump wanted them to vote to lift the debt ceiling, primarily because he wanted it lifted before he came in to office, so he wouldn't have to deal with it. And they stood firm. But since then, and a number of them were criticized for that, there hasn't been to date anything that we've seen where they've opted to exercise their legislative responsibility. As we heard with some of the questions early on about Gaza, a number of them were alarmed about that and spoke out, but there were an equal number of them who said they support the president in that initiative, which is, again, pretty astounding. So what's that old saying? May you live in interesting times. We're living in interesting times, and I can't emphasize this enough. As important as it is for legislators like myself and our whole congressional delegation works together. We're all on the same page with respect to this, and we'll continue to fight not only as individuals representing our constituents and district, but collaboratively. We also intend to further work with our AG in terms of what he's been able to do and the governor. And I think by working together on behalf of the citizens of the state of Connecticut and the people all across this great nation of ours, that we're going to be able to affect and influence change. Now, we are in the minority, and that's where, again, the public's voice is going to be vitally important as well, emphasizing not only to their elected officials within the state, but outside of the state. And then also, because of social media and the ability to go and utilize social media, to be able to comment about that as well. And I think that will create an active and vibrant understanding about the impact of so many of these executive orders and legislative priorities of Donald Trump.
Our next question comes from Darren in Manchester, who asks, how can Democrats overcome the right-wing, quote unquote, propaganda machine in the media that has been controlling messages to fit their narrative, especially when it seems that there's some disagreement still among Democrats in how to respond?
Could you repeat that again, Charles?
Yes, sorry. The question is, how can Democrats overcome the right-wing machine in the media that has been controlling messages to fit the Republicans' narrative?
Well, that's a great question, and one would have to say that strategically, and I think the question about controlling the media and the messaging is vitally important. And to be brutally honest, they're better at it than Democrats, not individually, but we take great pride in the fact that we are the most diverse political party in the world. And in the United States Congress, as former chair of the caucus, I was always first to point out how many caucuses within the caucus we have, and everyone with the opportunity to get their voice and their point of view heard. Diversity is a strength, but it also strategically, when poised against a straightforward, simple message, if you're hearing one message that's focused and you're hearing 8 messages, maybe equally focused, but not with the same venue or not with the same results. So again, let me commend Hakeem Jeffries, because I think he's doing the job of bringing Democrats together and having us come up with a more unifying, focused message. And that's not that anyone's individual concerns are left and put to the side, but we have to understand what we're competing for and what the battle is about. And now our focus is clearly to take back the majority in the midterms. We're 4 seats away from having a majority in Congress. And with focus, determination, and strategic messaging, and I think also the American people seeing what's unfolding before their eyes and what the ramifications of that are, I think will provide us with the opportunity to do this. But it is a very thoughtful and in-depth question to ask, and I'm sure a number of you listening out there have heard that or thought that as well. I think we have time to try to do a couple more questions, Charles, and then we'll try to wrap up so that we let people get to the Super Bowl parties or do whatever they have to do. And again, let me apologize for the being delayed on flight, et cetera, here. And Charles, why don't we go ahead?
Sounds good. We have one question from Susan, who is with us on Facebook, and she wants to know, what is the most effective means to get legislators' attentions, whether it's calls, emails, faxes, social media? Can you rank in order from most to least, or tell us, what are the most effective ways to reach your member of Congress?
Well, I would have to say all of the above, and primarily because every legislative office is going to keep track of all the various forms of contact. What they're going to want to know is what subject and how many are calling on that subject. So whether you're calling, whether you're writing, whether you're emailing, whatever the case may be, and of course, speaking directly to your member as well, but that doesn't happen as often as being able to pick up the phone to get out an email, a letter, a text, to go on social media, to utilize various opportunities, but to make sure that the member understands your concern, because every office will keep track of the number of the kind of correspondence it's getting from its constituents and want to know what they're saying and what their concerns are about. And so, but it is helpful. And I would also add, not only to your elected official, your 2 United States senators and you're a member of the House of Representatives, but also to Republican leadership, and whether it's the president, I doubt very seriously that they listen to too much or going to be influenced by much, but nonetheless, they still will be counting and weighing those concerns. But the legislators and, Republican legislators, Republican governors, Republican state houses, all of these, I think the more that people can speak out and let their concern be known, the stronger position we're going to be in. It is going to mean an awful lot of work, and that's oftentimes tedious. But you wouldn't be listening this evening on Super Bowl Sunday. You wouldn't be participating if you didn't have a deep and abiding concern about what's happening to your government and how you can best respond. There is no simple solution in a democracy. There never has been. But by Americans sticking together and Americans letting their voices be heard, that's what's going to effectuate change. And I'm not as adept at social media as a lot of members are, but other members tell me that the more adept people are at that in terms of getting their message out as well, because as things go viral and they spread across the country, that has an impact as well.
Thank you, Congressman. We have one last question from Jake in Manchester, who would really like to know who will be scoring the first touchdown at the Super Bowl.
Well, I wish I knew that as well, Jake, but with the New England Patriots not in the Super Bowl, I could have predicted Gronkowski back in the day, but both are very good teams. You don't get to the Super Bowl if you're a slouch, and obviously, I think Kansas City is favored, but both teams are talented. I'm an East Coast guy. I'm pulling for the Eagles. I was kind of hoping that it might be the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions. I thought that would have been an interesting Super Bowl, but that didn't pan out as well. But I want to thank Jake, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I said earlier, I was educated at Central Connecticut. I was a history teacher, and that was my great goal in life, because I had incredible history teachers in grammar school, high school, and in college. And it's heartening on these calls to see that how many people are devoted and are concerned and want to make sure that their voice is being heard, and they're coming out and speaking out. And that's vitally important in order for us to preserve this democratic republic that we all so deeply love. We are still, with all our warts and blemishes and faults, and there are many, the greatest nation in the world. And why is that so? It's because people like you care enough about your country, about the community you grew up in, about the state you live in, about the children you want to turn this democracy over to make sure that we're doing the right thing on behalf of people, and that no one, whether you're the wealthiest man in the world or just a simple billionaire gets to take away our freedoms or dictate how this country is going to move forward. Many have written and talked about how dictator prone so much of this seems, how it operates more like an oligarchy than a democracy. And elections do have consequences, but we have a system of checks and balances, and reinforcing that system is you. Thank you for being here today. Greatly appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from you and hearing from you at other events that we'll be conducting as we continue to keep a check and balance this budget and this government in the way the citizens were sworn to serve expect. God bless you. God bless America. Enjoy the Super Bowl.